Welcome to you all. We are very happy to be able to start the first day of our two-day conference, Women, Water, Climate, Tackling the Challenges. We could not have chosen a more appropriate theme. The whole world is facing challenges because of the COVID-19 virus. If we want to stop contamination, we need people to distance, wear masks, but most of all, we need clean drinking water and sanitation. We need women to support the sick, to look after their families, to make sure there is food and water. Climate change and disasters like flooding, tsunamis, earthquakes, droughts, forest fires are all water related. Women, Water, Climate wants all stakeholders involved. We want many to meet each other, to network, to understand the situation. We would have liked this conference to be hybrid, so that the people living in Sri Lanka and neighboring countries could have met each other. The corona lockdown in Sri Lanka has been extended till the 9th of November. The reason why we had to decide to make this into a full virtual Zoom webinar. We do hope that all speakers and participants will be able to have sufficient internet connection. The demands on the internet in Sri Lanka and other lockdown countries is creating quite a few issues. And not only the lack of data is a problem, also monkeys jumping on transformers. So please bear with us. This is going to be a wonderful conference with so much information, advice, challenges, discussions, and solutions to the way forward. And we want to hear your voices, your questions, and your opinion. Women for Water Partnership, in conjunction with its partners NetWwater and Soroptimist International of the Southwest Pacific, have organized a series of 8 case study webinars, plus this conference in October and November. Today, we'll introduce the last 2 of 8 case studies, the first one on Sand River mining, and the second one on water security in the Sri Lanka tea estates. These webinars and the conference were made possible through the grant of SEI, Stockholm Environmental Institute, in partnership with the government of Sweden and their Asia's Strategic Collaborative Fund, which aims to foster regional cooperation and political dialogue for sustainable development and environmental sustainability through capacity building, knowledge sharing, and increased collaboration. Please remember that this session will be recorded. So now I have the honor and pleasure of introducing our guest of honor, the Right Honorable Dinesh Gunawardena, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka, Skills Development, Employment and Labor Relations of Sri Lanka, and leader of MEP and Vice President of Sri Lanka, Nidasha Poduyana Sandanaya. Minister Dinesh Gunawardena was educated at the Royal College in Colombo. Afterwards, he studied at the Narayanan Business University in the Netherlands, graduating with an associate degree in business administration and management. He then joined the University of Oregon, graduating with a BBA in business administration, management, and international transport. The minister got many honors and awards, like the Order of Isabella the Catholic awarded by the King of Spain, the International Pro-Poor Leader awarded by the Slum Dwellers International, and Cuba's Solidarity Order awarded by the government of Cuba. Due to the COVID-19 restrictions, the minister could not join us live, but he pre-recorded his presentation just to be sure. So, Honorable Minister, it is my greatest pleasure to listen to you again. I was very impressed with your speech during the World Water Forum in Marseille, and please, the floor is yours, Minister.
Dear Mariet, Verhoef-Cohen, President, Women for Water Partnership, Kusamata Kurala, Chair of the NetWwater, and distinguished speakers of the Women, Water, Climate, Tackling the Challenges Conference. This conference, which aims to foster regional cooperation and policy dialogue for sustainable development and environmental sustainability through capacity building, knowledge sharing, and increased collaboration, is timely despite the constraints due to the global pandemic. I'm once again happy to be with you all after many years, joining you all as Minister of Water Supply and today as the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated the critical importance of sanitation, hygiene, and adequate access to clean water for preventing and containing diseases. Hand hygiene saves lives. According to the World Health Organization, hand washing is one of the most effective actions you can take to reduce the spread of pathogens and prevent infections, including COVID-19 virus. Ensuring good and consistently applied wash and waste management practices in communities, homes, schools, marketplaces, prisons, and healthcare facilities will further help to prevent human transmission of the COVID-19 virus. However, we have to sadly remember that 4.2 billion or 55% of the world's population do not have access to even basic hand washing facilities at home. This is a major challenge that the world is facing today. Recently, Sri Lanka drinking water coverage is 94%. Sanitation coverage is 92%, the best in South Asia. Sri Lanka government is striving to increase the overall access to improved drinking water supply, which will improve health of the people, better sanitation facilities, environmental programs, and enhance living standards of all. Sri Lanka recognizes the fact that water has social, environmental, and cultural values in addition to its economic values. Sri Lanka's civilization, like many others, is based on water. Large number of reservoirs, canals, dilapidated irrigation structures, and inscriptions stand testimony to the dynamics of our hydraulic civilization. Our ancestors conserved water not only for irrigation and domestic purposes, but also for conservation of the environment, retention of soil moisture, and maintenance of the water table. The technology used by ancient rulers baffles the engineers of today. The temporal and spatial disparities in annual rainfall have led the ancient rulers of Sri Lanka to develop the tank cascading system. The main principle behind the tank cascading system is recycling and reuse of water through a network of small to large scale tanks. Tank cascading system controls the seasonal flooding, drought in the dry zone, and also ensure the continuous cultivation of paddy rice during the rainy and dry seasons, and provide seasonal water supply for domestic and livestock consumption. Village tanks and their association with ancient irrigation works in Sri Lanka were reported by Brohaya in 1935. During the last few years, the frequency of climate disaster occurrence in the country has caused water stresses to people in almost all districts due to the drought and floods. Heavy rainfall, floods, long droughts are frequent occurrences and has increased significantly over the past 10 years, leading to Sri Lanka being positioned second in the recent ranking based on the vulnerability to climate change by the Global Climate Risk Index in 2019. Climate change has significant impacts on freshwater sources, affecting the availability of water used for domestic and productive tasks. The consequences of the increased frequency in floods and droughts are far-reaching, particularly for vulnerable groups, including women, who are responsible for water management at the household level. All over the developing world, women and girls bear the burden of fetching water for their families and spend significant amounts of time daily hauling water from distant sources. Water from distant sources is rarely enough to meet the needs of the household and is often contaminated, such that women and girls are also pay the heaviest price for poor sanitation. Deterioration in water quality and quantity will impact food availability and water access and utilizations, particularly among the poor rural farmers, of which women comprise 40 to 43%, especially in communities of the Asian and African river deltas. Natural disasters impact women more severely due to the structural inequalities in economic and social rights, cultural, economic, and social disadvantages. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the global economy is projected to reduce sharply by 3% in 2020, experiencing its worst recession since the Great Depression. UN Sustainable Development Goals (SDG) set in 2015 aims to ending extreme poverty, giving people better health care, and achieving equality for women by 2030. This Conference on Women and Water and Climate connects three of the UN Sustainable Development Goals: gender equality, clean water and sanitation, and climate action. Women are central to the collection and safeguarding of water, responsible for more than 70% of water cause and management worldwide, and are therefore key to laying the foundation of a resilient society. SDG 17 emphasizes the strong international cooperation is needed now more than ever to ensure that countries have the means to recover from the pandemic, build back better, and achieve the sustainable development goals. Therefore, conference of this nature, building partnerships, sharing knowledge, and collaboration is very timely and very important to recover from this global pandemic and plan better water management in the future. I wish the conference success.
Thank you very much, Minister. This was very inspiring to start like this on our first day of the conference. Our keynote speaker is no one other than Dr. Dipak Gyawali, former Minister of Water Resources of Nepal, professor at the Nepal Academy of Science and Technology. Mr. Dipak is a hydroelectric power engineer and a political economist who during the times as Nepal's Minister of Water Resources in 2002 and 2003, initiated reforms in the electricity and irrigation sectors focused on decentralization and promotion of rural participation in governance. He also initiated the first national review and comparison of Nepali laws with the guidelines of the World Commission on Dams. Dr. Dipak has been a visiting professor at the university in Japan, as well as a research scholar at the East-West Center in Hawaii, the Queen Elizabeth House in Oxford, the London School of Economics, and the International Environmental Academy in Switzerland. His research focuses on the interface between technology and society as related to water and energy issues. Mr. Dipak Gyawali has published extensively, both academically and in the popular press, on water resources, environment and development issue. Mr. Dipak, the floor is yours, and we're very happy that you could join us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we have my slides up? I could share the screens if there's a problem. Susie? Yes, it's coming up. Good. I'll just have to say next whenever let me start first by talking about the fact that we are facing wicked challenges. Okay, and I was looking for a symbolic picture to capture this, and a friend of mine directed me to this very nice picture here, where we see what we do to our rivers, how the market forces encroach upon riverine space, you know. And if this is sustainable development, then tell me what the meaning of sustainable is, because that house and everything around it is going to go when you have a major flood. Okay? But this is a reality, and this is what we look at. This is an example of a misplaced hubris that we all, in all over South Asia, I dare say all over the global South, even in the North, okay, live under the uncertainty of climate change. Okay? This is from the Tarai in Nepal. Now, I have a roadmap. I'm basically going to talk to you about the problem of science itself and the kind of science we do. We do too much of what I would call reductionist science and not enough of systemic science. I'll talk about the problem there, both of style and scale. I'll talk about the need for toad's eye science versus eagle eye science. I'll talk about 3 examples in Nepal related to this conference about springs drying across the Himalaya. Bringing up enormous problem of water supply in villages where entire villages have to be abandoned. We'll talk about, I use the term biocide specifically. There is no such thing as pesticides because those things just don't kill only pests. They kill everything, including humans, okay? And then something about riverbed mining. And I'll then finally conclude by talking about what it means for those, what we call in our research, those left behind. That's women, children, aged, handicapped, you know, especially in times of water-related disasters. Next, please. Next, yeah. This is just a list. I know that many students and many young activists are listening on. This is for your reference because at the end of this talk, I'm sure I'm going to leave you very confused, which is my purpose actually, because I believe that confusion is the first sign of the dawning of wisdom. It's people who are not confused and know everything that are a serious problem and the most boring people on life in the world. So you can go to these kind of references if you feel that you need to know something more. Next, please. Next, yeah, this one, yeah. Now, there is a serious problem of the social sciences that we have had in the past. We either had too much bureaucratic socialism, that is state controlling everything, development and everything, or we, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, went in for, the way of all flesh, as they say, all market, that markets will do everything. Somewhere along the way, there was a dawning of, reality that we need both market and state. Often the state was still just subsumed under the market, but even that was not sufficient, okay? So what we argue in the kind of social sciences that I do, called cultural theory, is that when it comes to wicked problems like climate change, problems of water, problems of energy, problems of social problems related to inequality and lack of inclusiveness, whether it's gender or handicapped and all, these are wicked problems. These are opposed to tame problems that can be solved by textbook engineering. Wicked problems cannot. Okay, so conventional sciences, social sciences fail, and even though sometimes people talk of public-private partnership, to us that's still highly incomplete. you know it's only an alliance between the top two legs of the stool, market individualism and bureaucratic hierarchism. And often in the kind of social sciences that we do, that is the very definition of fascism, if we exclude the third leg, which is the civic leg, the leg of civic activist egalitarianism. Okay, so what we need is not PPP, we need PPCP, public private civic partnerships. And policy making has to be three-legged, because each one of these styles, we call them organizing styles, has a very different definition of what the problem is. Okay, they have a different view on risk, completely different. Markets are risk takers, governments are risk managers, activists are risk sensitizers. They have a very different view of justice, a very different view of nature, and indeed development itself. Okay, now each one of them also uses a very different form of power. Markets use persuasive power, governments use coercive power, and the activists use moral power. And this comes from the kind of Hindu Buddhist philosophy also, that I have at the bottom of my screen on tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic thing. This comes from Samkhya philosophy, which is the basis of a lot of Hindu and Buddhist philosophies. Okay, next, please. Now, this is ideal. Okay, this is the ideal world. Unfortunately, we do not live in an ideal world. What we have, unfortunately, is that we have what we call the distortion of dharma, that governments don't maintain their dharma, markets don't maintain their dharma, and nor do civic movements. Okay? We have governments that instead of being trustees are rent seeking, highly corrupt in many cases. We have markets that are not really genuine, competitive, and all that. They're crony capitalism. Okay? And then you have civil society that actually, instead of becoming, this voice of activist civic voices, they become business and politics by other means, what I call bongos, dongos, gongos, and pongos. In Nepal's case, the worst are what I call pongos. These are party organized NGOs, okay, or business organized NGOs or government organized NGOs. So this is where the real problem comes. The development triangle, the triad of policy space is highly distorted. Okay, in reality, it's corrupted. You might say each one is not doing what its dharma entails that it do. Okay, so they end up undermining their own dharma. This is a problem of style, that of style of development, you might say. Next, please. So there's also a problem of scale. Now, this is a very interesting thing. I was giving a lecture in the Mekong, and I was describing a situation in the deserts in Colorado and in the northern Tibetan, Nepal-Tibet border high altitude desert. We have a phenomenon, and there's a local native name for it, both in America and in Nepal, which I've kind of forgotten. But what it is that you have rainfall, okay? But the trouble is the raindrop never hits the ground. It evaporates before it hits the ground. Okay? And this is a very interesting phenomenon. And you still have a desert below, even though you had rain. Okay? Because the atmosphere is so dry and the air pressure is so low that the water drop never really makes it to the ground. Now, I find this very symbolic in much of our development, because we have government and international policies, whether they are MDGs and SDGs, or you have lots of stuff on climate and all that, that cause a lot of thunder and lightning at a high level. But when you come down to the village level, there's not a drop of that policy to be seen. Not a single Nepali villager ever heard about what MDGs are. Okay? And so there is a problem, and this we identify by saying it's a problem of scale, where you have too much what we call eagle eye science. They're necessary, satellite image, remote sensing data, they're all very nice. But without some toad's eye science of what actually happens down on the ground and the kind of science that needs to be done there, then you find out that your policy decisions, your development decisions are very wonky, and they lead to completely wrong conclusions. So you need both. Eagle eye science lacks roots, while toad's eye science may lack the broader perspective. Okay, but problem right now is we lack towards eye science. That's the bigger challenge right now. And this is where civic movements are so important, because they're down with the villagers at the grassroots, highlighting the problems they face. Next, please. Now, the three examples I talk about is the drying of springs across the Himalaya. Okay. Now, you see, when you say Himalaya, everybody talks ice, snow, glaciers, and all that sort of stuff. The majority of the Himalayan hills where people live in Nepal, most of them, never get snow.
I think that the screen is frozen. Dr. Dipak, you could close your screen, and then maybe you've got a better internet to continue.
Okay. Now, so I was at this point where these springs are drying up. Entire villages have to be abandoned. But let us not jump too hastily to say that this is all climate change. No, our research shows that it is other drivers that's leading to the drying up of springs, which is mismanagement of water. That is over pumping. We have new technologies now. People don't carry water in pots from their springs. They plug in a PVC pipe and turn on an electric motor. As a result, there is a lot of over pumping, and the groundwater, just like it's disappearing in many parts of India, and the groundwater table is going down. The hill groundwater, the water tower, is also disappearing. And when water disappears in the groundwater, you don't know which springs dries up first. Okay, so this is leading to a serious problem. It's also a serious problem because the recharge is going down, because people have abandoned livestock keeping. They're migrating out to the Gulf for labor job. So when they stop keeping livestock and the buffaloes, the buffalo wallowing ponds, which used to recharge the water, now are all dried up. So the water is not getting recharged into the groundwater and this thing also, the springs. Okay, so there are these other drivers. Now, what I'm essentially driving at is, and what our research is saying, is we are about the only people who started looking at this problem, because it's such a towards eye science problem. We found out that spring studies could not be done at the national level. It could not be done at the district level. It had to be done at a village ward level, and this is where towards eye science is so important, because at the eagle eye, you're blind to it. Okay, the problem becomes a cancer and it's there. Next, can we go to the next one? Yeah. And you see, this leads to the kind of technology choices, that on a river in the Tara, from the hill to the Tarai, on which sand mining a PhD student of mine worked on. I'll talk about it. This is the same river. We had traditional technologies, the brushwood dam that you see on the left. Okay, now these were disposable dams, environmentally very friendly, because came the monsoon, it got washed off. Nobody needed water during the monsoon. Okay, floods. But during the dry season, it just diverted enough water to the fields to give you a second, third crop. Unfortunately, no engineering school teaches this. We are only taught cement. As a result, they built a dam that you see on the right-hand side. The trouble is, the river, the year the dam was complete, the river moved away. So the dam was standing there high and dry, a tribute to man's stupidity. Okay, and you destroyed the irrigation system down below to create this modern structure. As a result, the villagers who had traditional system had no system at the end of it, and the area became a dacoit infested area, because people had to survive somehow to do whatever it took to survive. Eventually, another technology came. You see this famous Kirloskar pump. If you can't buy, and the area is swimming in groundwater, so if you can't buy one, you can rent one for 50 rupees an hour, and it comes to you on a bullock cart. Okay, so you see three types of technology: community-led technology on the left-hand, brushwood dam; the agency department, big government department-led cement dam; and the market-led pump. Okay, so you see that there are three different types of technologies that come from three different styles of organizing. All of them are necessary, and if you have all of them in place, in bigger or smaller ways, you get better sustainability and resilience. That's exactly what the style and scale issue is, where unfortunately there's a hegemony of too much civil engineering and too much bad economics at the big agency, development agency, and government agency level, that opts for these big structures without looking at the options, other options that are more environmentally and socially and even economically from the perspective of a farmer, feasible. Next, please. Yeah. Now, pesticides. Now, this is something we came across as we were doing our research on water-induced disaster and those left behind. That is, women, children, aged, handicapped. Okay. It turned out that one of the bigger disasters was pesticide. It's a waterborne disaster because people spray pesticides in a very wrong way in the fields. Okay, and as a result, what happens is that um, uh, it it ends up in your water system, it ends up in food, and there are basic problems. There's a wrong name. Pesticides are not really pesticides, they're biocides. They kill everything, including humans. Okay, your regulations are weak or non-existent. Okay, many chemicals banned in America, Europe are finding their way under a rebranded name in many third world countries. Okay, and proper application techniques are missing. People are just using their bare hands to spray these, spread these things. Yeah? As a result, the problem which I identify at the bottom of the screen, you see, there's feminization of agriculture going on. The men are all in the Gulf herding camels, I guess, and the women have had to manage the agriculture. As a result, ironically, this is happening in very prosperous vegetable growing area that people are making a lot of money growing vegetables and selling them. It's a cash crop, very valuable, but they apply pesticides. As a result, you've had cancer among women as young as 12 years old. It shouldn't happen. Okay, cancer is supposed to happen when you're past 60 or 70, god knows. Okay, but this is happening, and it's entirely due to this kind of disaster. Okay, it's also leading to the death of domestic and national park animals, because people spray this thing, and the cow goes and munches on a patch of grass that's got too much pesticide in it, and next morning your cow is dead. Okay. Now these are the kind of disasters that's happening. Next, please. And finally, a riverbed mining. Okay, now this is a huge problem. This is from my PhD student who is a principal of an engineering college right now, but in his research, you showed that this is big business. So let's be clear about it. Much of the highway building in northern India and the Gangetic Plains in India, in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, comes from the riverbed mining in Nepal. The Gangetic Plains don't have stones. Okay, it's very fine silt for almost 5,000 feet. It's heavily alluvial soil area. So to build the highways, you need the stone aggregates, and they're all coming from Nepali rivers, and this is how they're coming. On the one hand, the rivers are being encroached by market pressure of urban expansion. You can see the walls there, and a river has completely been jacketed, as we say. Okay, so when the flood comes, it comes and takes everything away. Floods are much more dangerous now. The other is there's this, we call it the bulldozer terrorism. These bulldozers are being used to dig up, stone, everything, and all that. You see it in the bottom picture also. The net result is that the water table is declining now. And what the water table decline means is that the hand pumps, as well as the traditional wells, are going dry. So people, we talk of COVID, and and this is one problem we have. They say wash your hands for 20 seconds, 20 times a day or something. We have people living in cities, laborers who keep the city alive by their services, living 6 or 8 to a room, where there's only one outhouse, and the landlord provides no more than 3 liters of water per capita per day. And if you want to wash your hands about 20 seconds, even for 5 times, somebody did a calculation and said the water supply has to be increased about 20 times to 90 liters per capita. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing that came out is that the fish species have declined very badly. Okay, both in abundance and the number of species. And so as a result, 2,500 families that were dependent on it have now come down to about 200 or 300, the rest having had to migrate as laborers to the Gulf. Okay? So in short, and I'll close with this, so let's remember that, and this is affecting the poorest, as we say, the most marginalized, those left behind. First is that the climate change problem was created by the energy sector, but the impact is felt by society through the water sector. Water is life, and it touches everything. Everything. By everything, I mean just about everything. So most of the problem we have here today with water shortage and all that, drying up of springs, pesticides, are problems that we created, which climate change will only make worse. So if there are problems we created, we have time to do something about it. So when climate change impact becomes worse, at least we'll be better off by having handled those drivers that we can do something about. COVID pandemic, as I said, has exposed the limits of conventional sciences and the medical profession. I mean, how do you deal with people living 8 in a room and having to work every day to survive, to eat? If you don't eat in the day, you can't, if you don't work in the morning, you can't eat in the evening. And then rethinking development. We need to really rethink from mal development to app development using things like nexus approach, more systemic science, and things like that. It's a big challenge in front of us, and I think this coming recession will force us to that, whether we like it or not. And finally, I would say that we need to address these problems with far more towards eye science. Yes, eagle eye science is important, but what is lacking is towards eye science, and I'm sure the problem in Sri Lanka with riverbed mining is also something that only towards eye science has been able to bring to the fore. Eagle eye science sees this as great aggregate material having a great market in road building and others, failing to realize that you're destroying the fish species, you are destroying the nutrient assets of the poorest people who depend on them, and a whole lot of issues. Okay, so that's where I see. I would argue that this approach that we have had in the past to development, to science, and others really needs serious rethinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dipak. This was really very interesting, and you really tackled all the issues that that we envisaged in our videos. That is really very interesting. And I thank you for your points of view, but also your insight and all your experience. This will be so very helpful for our way forward. So I can but thank you for joining us and giving us this absolute enlightening speech. So now we will continue with the two case studies in Sri Lanka. We start with the river sand mining, and I will give the floor to the case study moderator, Badra Kamaladasa. And Mrs. Badra worked in the irrigation department of Sri Lanka, starting as a junior engineer. And after many years retiring as the Director General of Irrigation. In her capacity as Director General, she oversaw the irrigation department's responsibility in riverine management, in addition to the management of water resources for the whole of Sri Lanka. Aside from water resource management, her work has involved gender in the water sector, as well as river training and environmental assessments. Throughout her career, she was a regular resource person for numerous awareness-raising programs committed and conducted by NetWwater and the Sri Lanka Water Partnership, particularly on the impacts of river sand mining on communities. Badra, I'm really happy that you're here. Please present your team on the river sand mining case studies. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mariet. Very good morning, good afternoon, all of you who joined us live at this moment to listen and share your thoughts on this very important subject, river sand mining, its impact on water security, environment, and livelihood. So, as introduced by Mariet, I was involved as a resource person in many awareness programs on impact of excessive river sand mining conducted by several organizations. So I feel that it is a great privilege to me be the moderator of this webinar today. So this is the first phase of the series of events as described by Mariet, organized under the theme of Women, Water, Climate, Tackling the Challenges by Women Water Partnership in conjunction with its partners NetWwater, Sri Lanka, and Soroptimist International of Southwest Pacific. So the flow of this case study, which I am moderating, the proceedings will be as follows. Susie, can I have my slide, please? Okay. So my introduction will take 5 minutes to the subject. That will be followed by the case presenter, Engineer Dileepa Hettiarachchi, and there will be an introductory video on impact of river sand mining before his presentation, It will be shown at the beginning of the presentation to give you all a general overview over the issue. Then Dileepa will share his experience within 15 minutes of his presentation. After his case study presentation on the Adroya River, there will be a response to the subject matter by Ms. Kiran Pereira. As the discussant, she will elaborate her views within 10 minutes time. Then we will listen to the views of Ms. Paridhi Rostogi, the viewpoint of a young professional on the river sand mining subject what we are talking now. So after her presentation, there will be a video presentation comprising of few video recordings made last week on the Adroya River Basin. That will be shown as rushes with titles and it will take about 10 minutes. The Sri Lanka case study 2 will be presented immediately after this case study. So the Q&A session on this case study 1, river sand mining 2, will be taken up along with the case study 2. The Q&A session, if everything goes well in our this current session, will start by 4:10 p.m. Sri Lanka time, that is after 1.5 hours time from now onwards. Please, as mentioned by Mariet, kindly note that these proceedings will be recorded and will be posted in the in YouTube later on. Now it is time for us to listen to the let me introduce the background of the illicit sand mining and its impact on water, women, climate and environment. I need not to emphasize how important sand as a raw material in construction industry used in many development projects. It is identified as the second largest natural resource, first being the water, second is the sand to extract from nature and trade. So it's a tradable commodity. With the increase in demand, humans now spend sand budget faster than the rate that is produced by nature. Hence, invariably sand extracted from its source, from rivers or sand dunes, damaging terrestrial, riverine, and ocean ecosystem, the whole ecosystem of the world. This issue has not been identified until recently by the global community as a threat. Only in 2018, United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP, conducted a study to produce action-oriented global conversation. In Dr. Dipak's terminology, it is eagle eye view. The UNEP report is available in internet and to read anybody. The study team concentrated on how sand resources could be consumed and produced responsibly in future, finding new solutions for environmental governance of global sand resources. If I quote one paragraph in their conclusion in the report, quote, the scale of the challenge inherent in sand and gravel extraction makes it one of the major sustainability challenge of the 21st century. These materials are one of the largest resources extracted and traded by volume, yet it is one of the least regulated activities in many regions. I repeat, yet it is one least regulated activities. For one of the most traded commodities in the planet, there is a very low general awareness about widespread extraction impacts. Rivers, river deltas, and coastlines are eroding. Sand mafias are thriving and demand continues to grow. As Dr. Dipak mentioned, it is a sand mafia operating in every corner of the world. So we can see now many global forums have selected the river sand mining as a main theme in their proceedings. India Water Week this year, for example, has given a prominence to this subject. However, in Sri Lanka, many organizations have identified this as a critical issue and made many interventions for nearly 2 decades. Let us now listen to Engineer Dileepa, what he can tell us about the Dadroya. Now it is in the toad's eye view. Again, I am using the terminology used by Professor Dipak. So Dileepa, now if I introduce in brief Dileepa Chaturanga Hettiarachchi is an engineer attached to the irrigation department of Sri Lanka, and currently he is the divisional irrigation engineer in Puttalam. Dileepa holds a BSc engineering, civil engineering degree and an MSc in engineering with a specialization in structural dynamics from University of Saitama, Japan. He is engaged in control of the sand mining activities in Dadruwa River Basin. He takes active role in preventing illicit river sand mining and mitigating negative impacts on riverine system in two major rivers in his area, Dadruwa and Mawaya. Dileepa, the floor is yours now.
Good evening, all of you, and thank you, Kamaladasa Madam, for the introduction about me. So the time is restricted, so I will start my presentation now. It's a case study on effective for illicit river sand mining in the Dadruwa River in Sri Lanka. So as you all can see in the dark blue color line, I have mentioned the Dadruwa. Next, please. Next. So these are the main sources for extracting sand in Sri Lanka. So I no need to go through them, but nowadays there is a high trend for use wash sand in Sri Lanka. Next, please. This graph, the first one shows how the demand for sand in the construction industry is increased with time. And accordingly, we can predict that nowadays the demand might have gone to 20 million cubic meters per year. Then the next slide, it shows out of the total demand of sand, it required 60% to the west coast of a country. Unfortunately, the Dadruwa is located in the west coast of our country, near to the west coast of our country. And on the other hand, it flows through urban and suburban areas where it has many access to the main road system. So that makes sand miners high to the Dadruwa, and it's make a devastation there. So let me just explain some information about Dadruwa Basin. Dadruwa is the sixth longest river in Sri Lanka, runs around 142 kilometers, starting from West Kandy, Matale Hills, and it's end up with Chilau area where I'm working. And the catchment itself will receive the rainfall about approximately 4,313 million cubic meters per year, and approximately 27% of it will reach to the sea in Chilau area. Next slide, please. This will explain the land use pattern along the Dadruwa River stretch. Basically, it's located in Coconut Triangle. It's very famous for coconut cultivation. And irrespective of that, paddy cultivation, homestead, and highland crops and settlements also are there. Next slide, please. So let us move to our topic and why it's boom of river sand mining with time. First thing is the increase of unit price for sand. If you consider year 2000, it was about 1,000 rupees of Sri Lanka rupees for 1 meter, 1 cube of sand. But it has been now raised up to 13,000 rupees per cube, and in some situation it goes up to 17 even. Then the second case is increasing of demand for sand in the construction industry, especially after the post-tsunami period and end of the Civil War period. Then next one is less attention to the illicit river sand mining activities took place along the rivers and late identification of its negative impacts. This next one is poor monitoring of activities along the river and under experiment about the river and its morphology by the related institutions. Last but not least, the political influences always is there. Next slide, please. So let's discuss about how the illicit river sand mining activities in the Dadruwa has caused negative impacts in environment, social and economic aspects. I would like to say that in the case of negative impacts on the environment, we can consider the lowering of river water level has automatically lowered the groundwater level severely, and it affected to the coconut and other cultivation and adjoining sub-ecosystems. And irreversible damage to the river banks by erosion and falling a line of coconut trees following after the floods, which caused more damage to the river embankments. Then intrusion of salt wedge toward the inland, and it damaged the existing ecosystem severely. Then loss of riverbed profile vertically and horizontally. And finally, at the tail end of the river, it accelerate of sea erosion in river mouth because of loss of sand budget and damage to the sediment transportation. Next slide, please. I no need to further explain that you can all understand by looking at these two figures how damage has been caused to the environment nowadays. Some locations, the river bed has gone 5 to 6 meters from the river bank. Next slide, please. Next few slides will show you some of the devastation that we have done for the Dadruwaya. These photographs was taken in year 2006 by Mihisara Foundation. And in the first figure, it shows that how people has damaged the river bed by digging sand. Next one. So this is how they have damaged to the river embankment just to take their tractors and tippers to load sand from the river bed. Next one. So no words to express. Nobody was feared to take sand from the river. Next, please. Not only from the river bed, they finally try to take sand from embankment, just load and cut and load and they bring. And on the other hand, they have damaged and polluted the river water too. Next one. So this was the road condition at those days because of the heavy transportation of tractors and tippers. Road is belong to them, not for the villagers. Next one. So let us see what are the social negative impacts caused by these river sand mining activities. Simply now we had led to the river to overwhelm the lands, properties and cultivation. We have no any action to do now. And the build-up of the river sand mafia along this area. And finally, the people and the villagers lost their confidence on government agencies and they become exhausted. And on the other hand, most of the people have lost their traditional jobs and villagers simply become slaves of river sand mining activities. And when we consider household activities, women lost their early lifestyle. Nowadays, some people have to walk 1 or 2 kilometers just to grab potable water. And youngers found easy way of making money by engaging with river sand activities, not with their education. So this make women more in trouble, and finally they came to front and make a big voice against the river sand mafia. Next slide. So these figures show how the people has become victims in river sand mafia activities and because of the money without considering their health, their age, their gender. They just do the river sand activities. But finally, most of them has realized how damage they have done to the river, the Duruvaya and the environment, and they try to make noise against these river sand mining activities. Next, please. Let us see what are the economical negative impacts caused by the river sand mining activities in the Duruvaya. Simply, it's damage to the infrastructures in either side of the river sides and lowering of river bed level, make malfunctioning of inlet structures of community-based organizations and irrigation systems belong to farm organizations and drinking water facilities. And on the other hand, it has been inactivation of natural water inlets to the mine irrigation cascade tank systems in either side of the Dadruwaya. As an example, in Chilau area, there is one tank cascade system which was fed by Dadruwaya in early days, but now no longer Dadruwaya can feed the cascade. So farmers has to give up their cultivation. Then acceleration, the river meandering process, even though it's a natural process, but the activity is accelerated and led to degradation of adjoining lands. Next slide, please. So these footages will explain the current situation of the Dadruwaya. And in the middle, maybe after 1 or 2 years, these houses will all gone away. Next slide, please. So this is one of a famous case, Sengalloy Anchor site, which was failed in year 2006 due to excessive sand mining in the downstream. And the system was failed for a long period, and now irrigation department had to spend about 550 million rupees of Sri Lankan rupees to restore it up to the condition in year 2020. Next slide. Regarding the groundwater lowering, I don't need to explain. If you look at these three figures in the top, you all can understand how devastation that happened, and ultimately it has been damage to the coconut cultivation and all the other cultivation. The other thing is people nowadays move to dig their own tube wells and pumping water to their cultivation, but this may be another problem in the future that we have to tackle. Next slide. Next slide. This is an aerial view that explaining the lower reach of the Daduruwaya starting from Sengalloya anchored in the top and end up with the river mouth. So this area totally suffering with damaging to the river bank erosion. Next slide, please. So this is the condition that we can experience throughout the lower reach of Daduruwaya that I have shown in the previous slide. During the flood, I took this photograph in year 2019. Then soon after seeing the flood, this is the condition. So we have to experience this same condition throughout the river from Sengallo and Cut and downstream up to the river mouth. Next slide. This pylon figure will show you how the erosion took place in one location in Daduruwaya. Two figures describing year 2006 condition and the condition at now 2020. So we can see right bank has been completely eroded. Next slide. This one shows one photograph I have taken during 2019 flood. During the flood, water is come up to the top level, and after sees the flood, it is eroding the river bank, and you can see the next figure in March 2020. Next slide. So we cannot forget about the climate change. Daduruwaya was normally experience a flood in latter part of the year, September to December. But nowadays, next slide please, we are experiencing climate changes nearly from year 2012 and up to now. If you look at these figures, we can understand now we are facing floods in middle of the year. It is we faced in 2016, 18, 19 also, and December also. And on the other hand, we can understand by looking at the first two rows, the rainfall intensity has been increased by 60% from year 2012 to 2016. That means we have to tackle with these climate changes and the damage caused by the illicit river sand mining. The combined effect will come into the scene. Next slide, please. So what has the actions taken so far to mitigate this one? As I explained earlier, the engagement of community leaders, environmental societies, women front runners, and pressure groups make lead toward mitigate the impact of river sand mining activities. Next slide, please. And we are lucky that Supreme Court order has given an order by banning river sand mining activities completely in the Daduruwaya. And Coastal Conservation Department also, they are putting a lot of effort to maintain the coastal belt because of loss of the sediment budget. Next slide, please. So we are now having a trend of appointing stakeholder committees for decision-making issues arise on river sand mining activities and any other activities involved in the rivers. So we will go as a group and all the line institutions will be combined and take decisions. That's a good trend toward taking decisions in river assessments. And the irrigation department itself has formed a branch called Riverine Management Branch. So they are also paying more attention than earlier to the river conditions. Next slide, please. Finally, I would like to propose what are the actions that we can take to minimize the effect of illicit river sand mining. We should closely monitor the activities along the river. And we have to welcome complaints of villagers, voice of environmental societies and youth, and taking immediate actions for them. Then we should conduct awareness sessions routinely, and we can develop it up to the school level awareness programs like River Day. And we should try to maintain the condition of the existing condition of the riverbed in adequate period until replenish the bed level to an equilibrium state. And development of basin investment plan, that also one of a lagging part, but now a CRIP project is addressing this issue. And finally, most important thing is we should encourage alternations for river sand in the construction industry. Next slide, please. As a conclusion, I would like to say that it's required direct involvement of government for making legal framework to control river sand mining activities, not in the river, but in all over the rivers in the country. While we should encourage alternatives for river sand, and we should empower the line institutions to manage the situation. Next slide, please. So this is the summary that I have spoken up to now. And the next slide will be explain some of the reference I have in use. So hope that I could convey some message to all of the listeners in this session. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deepal. You have tackled all the relevant issues within this 15 minutes time. I'm sure in your last summary slide you have given what was to be highlighted in the presentation. So without wasting much time, shall I now go to the discussion? Let us listen to her reactions to the Dileepa's presentation. To give a brief introduction about her, Kiran is our discussant. She was raised in India, where she witnessed the impacts of indiscriminate sand mining. Her work has been featured in the award-winning documentary Sand Wars and other media, such as Economist, BBC Radio 5, Al Jazeera, among others. She is also the co-author of Curbing Illegal Sand Mining in Sri Lanka and is the author of the forthcoming book entitled Sand Stories, Surprising Truth About the Global Sand Crisis and the Quest of Sustainable Solutions. She was also a member of Expert Roundtable contribution for the UNEP 2019 report, which I mentioned. Kiran lives in London and following her master's degree in geography at King's College London, where she explored this very pertinent topic today. She works as a social entrepreneur to find out the promotion and promote solutions to the global sand crisis by building connections across the science, policy, and industry. The floor is yours, Kiran. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much. It's a privilege to be part of this event. It's quite unlike many other events that are happening. The focus here is on women and climate change and how they're all intertwined. And I think this is very, very important. As you've heard, Dileepa, his slides were quite informative, and the pictures spoke volumes. Even if you don't hear a word of what we say, the pictures speak for themselves. I think it's quite shocking when you see the state of the riverbed. If there's one message that I'd like you to take home from what I say right now, is that sand is a non-renewable resource in human timescales. A sand grain is formed by weathering processes. So the action of wind, water, pressure, temperature, all of these act on mountains and break it down into gravel, breaks it down further into a sand grain. So it takes thousands and thousands of years, sometimes even millions of years, for every sand grain to be formed. We as humans have relied so far on work that nature has carried out over millennia. So all the resources that we are using now is work that has already happened. So the more we consume, the more impoverished a world we leave behind for future generations. And the speaker who will speak after me will illustrate that brilliantly. So as Badra spoke about, the UNEP has released a report in 2019 that talks about the scale of challenge. It really is the greatest challenge facing us, one of the most important sustainability challenges in the 21st century. And why is it such a challenge? If you look at concrete, sand and gravel forms about 60 to 75% of sand and gravel of concrete. If you take glass, 70% of batch composition of glass is formed by silica sand. So there are so many industries that depend on this particular resource, different kinds of sand, but still there are so many different industries that depend on it. What we need to consider is an overview. Where is it coming from? What do we do after these resources are consumed and used in this particular resource? So if there's one, what we saw in Sri Lanka right now is very symbolic of what's happening in many other countries. In fact, this problem has been found in over 70 countries across the world. And it's kind of shocking that we don't have any, what you must know is that extraction from land-based quarries or rivers or the seabed or lakes, for example, these are not regulated by any convention. We don't have any international conventions that regulate the extraction, use, and trade of sand. So it is a problem that is being recognized slowly. In fact, after the UNEP report that came out in 2019, the United Nations Environment Assembly has adopted two important resolutions. One is on mineral governance, and the second is on sustainable infrastructure. And this problem will again be tabled in the United Nations Environment Assembly that will happen next year. So you can expect growing governance at the global level, but it's very important at the local level, like Dipak has shared in the keynote speech. It's very, very important to take into account what's happening at the local scale level. So I think this is my key message. If there's one thing that we all need to remember, is that the more we extract, the more impoverished a world we leave behind for future generations. Women in particular are affected because they bear the burden of care. And so with that in mind, I will hand it over to Paridhi, who will tell us more about. Back to you, Badra. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kiran, for your views on this subject. As a member of UNEP team, I think you have got a very good overview of the issue globally, what is happening, and I hope you will continue your service there in the in continuing this subject in all other forums. So now it is time. I'm sorry. Now it is now time for us to listen to the young professional, young water professional. The next 10 minutes slot is allocated to express her views of the next generation, how the next generation expect the current generation to act upon in preserving this invaluable natural resource. The organizers invited Ms. Paridhi Rostogi to present young generation views considering her interest on environment and especially on sand mining. Paridhi Rostogi is currently pursuing her master's in Integrated Climate System Sciences at the University of Hamburg, Germany. Her thesis explores the representation of carbon fluxes in the ocean using data from Max Planck Institute Earth System Model, drawing from the disciplines of oceanography and biogeochemistry within the scope of climate modeling. She expects to finish her degree in early 2021. Originally from India, she holds a bachelor's degree with distinction in environmental engineering from Delhi Technological University. As a recipient of various awards for her academic achievements in both India and Germany, she has represented India and Germany at various environmental conferences in Asia, Europe, and US. Most recently, she was a participant of the Climate KIC journey in the summer of 2019. We are very happy to be with you today. And the floor is yours, Sanjeev.
Thank you so much, Badra. And that was quite the introduction. So hello, everyone. I hope you're all having a good day. So as already mentioned, my name is Badra, and I'm currently getting my master's in Integrated Climate System Sciences in Germany. So before I moved to Germany, I had the wonderful opportunity of spending 1 year interning at Global Water Partnership's South Asia Regional Office in Colombo, Sri Lanka. And I was part of the Young Professional Development Initiative. And as part of my internship, I got the opportunity of co-authoring various case studies about water and climate development projects in the region. And one of these projects was carried out by Sri Lanka Water Partnership, which is also called Lanka Jalani, which provided me my first glimpse into the complex issue of sand mining. So as already mentioned, my background was earlier in environmental engineering, and I saw sand from a very limited perspective. So I saw it as something that is integral to the construction and building processes and fundamentally is infinite, because without sand, there can be no construction. However, I wasn't really aware about the far-reaching consequences that sand has, not only on society, but also on ecosystems at large. And like mentioned by many of the speakers before me, like any environmental issue, the issue of sand mining also affects the most vulnerable the most. So may that be marginalized communities, women or children, especially in developing regions where sand is currently a resource which is being used indiscriminately. So before I share my views on this topic, I'd like to talk a little bit about this connection between sand mining and climate change. Given that this is what I'm studying, I think it would be interesting to look at it from that perspective. So when it comes to climate change, or more specifically anthropogenic climate change, so climate change that is influenced by human consumption, the emission of greenhouse gases is the driving factor. And of this, land use and land use change is one of the significant contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change identifies agriculture, forestry, land use, and associated changes as contributing nearly a quarter of the emissions that have contributed to anthropogenic climate change over the time frame of 2007 to 2016. So while on one hand, the process of sand mining transforms ecosystems and contributes to a changing climate, the fact that the climate is changing also amplifies the negative impacts associated with sand mining. And these negative impacts, as we've heard before from Dileepa and also from Kiran, have a broad range. So they could be as simple as a change in the hydrological regime. So for example, intensified precipitation or droughts, a higher incidence of disasters like floods and landslides, which can also be attributed to poor land management, or something which is far more encompassing. So the perfect combination of bad conditions. One such example was the event that I looked at while I was working on the case study that I co-authored with Ms. Kusum from Sri Lanka Water Partnership, thanks to whom I also have the opportunity of speaking with you today, about the 2015 Samsara landslide, which occurred in Aranayaka in Sri Lanka. So in addition to high intensity rains, which are becoming increasingly frequent, rampant logging and improper land management practices were considered as contributing factors to the landslide, which not only led to loss of life, loss of livelihood, but also heavily compromised the ecosystem services that were provided in that region. May they be the water supply or the ability to grow tea, which was something that was the main economic activity in the region. So as mentioned before, policy interventions are of the utmost importance. It is important to make sure that governments know where sand mining is occurring. However, on a more local scale, the Sri Lanka Water Partnership, along with its partner organizations, tested some strategies to help alleviate the post-disaster situation. So over the next few minutes, I would like to highlight something slightly more positive than what we've heard so far in terms of what were positive impacts of the work done by Sri Lanka Water Partnership. So in the direct aftermath of the disaster, the drinking water supplies were heavily compromised. And following the tenet that in a warming climate, dry regions get drier and wet regions get wetter. In the case of Sri Lanka, this made the region wetter since the rainfall was already was quite pronounced there, which makes rainwater harvesting a perfect technique to augment the water supply. And as a result of this, there were various rainwater harvesting units that were set up for use in the area. And this allowed for the local communities to focus on water, hygiene, and sanitation, which are often areas of concern that take a backseat under stress conditions. By creating the provision of water and sanitation services in schools, students were able to actually find a place of respite. And this is also correlated to higher attendance, not only by all students, but in particular for girl students who actually find that the provision of water makes them creates a more environment more conducive to getting educated. And in addition to this, school students were basically trained to become conduits of disaster risk reduction by becoming messengers of the messages of environmental protection, taking them back to their homes and families, and talking with their friends about this. This was facilitated by the creation of environmental clubs and by various events that focused on water conservation and environmental issues. And as a result, students actually became more aware about what's happening. And there was this ability to learn from what they know and apply what they know. I would like to quote Kusum at this point, and she once said that a child that does not encounter value in his or her environment cannot be expected to safeguard it. And by making sure that they have this sort of connection to their own environment, there is this ability to actually safeguard it. In addition, there is also this consensus that unless immediate measures are taken to improve the soil conservation, there is the strong possibility of another landslide. And this was actually tackled by creating awareness about the villagers that they are ultimately in charge of their own futures, and they must refrain from compromising the structural stability of the slopes that they live on and also earn their livelihood from. And by making them shareholders in development initiatives that were carried out in the region, the hope was to inspire public ownership and inspire them to become environmental stewards themselves. So ultimately, it was found that it's only through engagement with the community that sustained change can be created. A model that involves and is supported by the communities. And one way was by utilizing local knowledge and by providing a platform for local leaders to share best practices by bringing regional experts together, as was also done as part of the project. So while there is a case for rehabilitation work post-disaster, it is my personal opinion that climate change adaptation is far less attractive than climate mitigation in the longer term. And the longer term solution would be to use sand sustainably, to mine it sustainably, to source it from sustainable sources and reutilize it wherever possible. This is possible with awareness, engagement, and empowerment, but I think at some level it also requires a drastic shift in priority and a change in how we actually look at growth. Because the current model of growth that we currently look at, which involves building skyscrapers and reclaiming land and expanding in ways which is not sustainable, is perhaps not the best model to ensure that me and other young people around the world get to live in the sort of world that we imagine. So with this, I thank you the time and space to share my thoughts on the matter, and I look forward to your comments. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much, Badra. Now, your insights are very much pertinent at this time. I'm sure the policy direction, policy decisions that you made mentioned should be taken by the current generation, not leaving it to your generations. And UNEP report, UNEP initiative has focused that matter very in a very much positive way, and hopefully the global community will take it up as the next course of action in their other seminars and forums. So with this presentation, I will hand over the floor to the organizers. Mariet, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to coordinating, in moderating this session. Thanks all the presenters and also the discussant and young water professional for joining us to make this event successful. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Badra. It was it was a lovely case study, and we got so much information. There's one little thing that I wanted to add is that Kieran at the time is at the moment writing a book, and the book is called Scent Stories. It's about surprising truths about the global scent crisis and the quest for sustainable solutions. The book will be launched on the 1st of December 2020, so next month, and more information on that book is available on scentstories.org. I think that we ought to have mentioned that, because it is interesting to know that this scent mining issue is not something only to Sri Lanka. It is really happening in a lot of countries, and that is what made it so interesting. So thank you, Badra, for everything that you did to create this wonderful presentation. Now, there has been a few trips and we made videos. I am absolutely thrilled that we are able to see this video, because we got little slots of the grassroots and the local and community people in the field talking about their challenges and what is happening. Because of the weather, because of a lot of rain, it was all last minute. So I must thank the group that created this video, because they worked till in the early hours of this morning to be able to show it to you all. Susie, I hope you can download it, and I hope you will enjoy the presentation of this video.
අපි මේ දැන් ඉන්නේ දැදුරුවේ පහළ නිම්න ප්‍රදේශයේ එහෙමත් නැත්නම් අපි කියන lower reach of the river කියන කොටසේදී පුත්තලම දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ දැදුරුවේ ඇතුළු නාම තියෙන ප්‍රදේශයේ තමයි අපිට මේ දැන් දකින්න හම්බෙන්නේ. අපි මේ දැන් ඉන්නේ බිංගිරිය විලත්තෑව නම් ස්ථානයේදී. මෙම ස්ථානයේ තියෙන විශේෂත්වය තමයි අපිට මේ වපසරිය දිහා බලනකොට පේනවා දැදුරුවේට සහ එහි තියෙන යූරෝ වලට සිදු වෙලා තියෙන හානිය සහ ඒ හානිය අවම කරගන්න අප විසින් දරා ඇති ප්‍රයත්නය සහ ඒ වෙනුවෙන් අපිට ගිය වියදම පිළිබඳ අදහසක් අපිට ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඊට අමතරව අපි කල්පනා කරොත් මෙන්න මෙතන තියෙන high tension tower එක ගැන ඒකේ පාදම විශේෂ අවධානයක් අපි යොමු කරොත් ඒකට වෙලා තියෙන හානිය අපිට පේනවා. ඒකෙන් පේනවා ගඟේ යූරෝ කොයිතරම් යටකට හැරලා තියෙනවද කියන එක. ඊට අමතරව මෙම ඉදිකිරීම සිදු කරලා තියෙන බොහොම ඉහත කාලයේදී එහා පැත්තේ යූරෝ ආසන්නේ. නමුත් අද වෙනකොට අපිට පේනවා මෙම හරියට නිකන් ගඟ මැදට මෙම ටවර් එක ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා වගේ. ඒකට හේතුව තමයි දකුණු අත පැත්තේ තියෙන යූරෝ දැඩි ලෙස කාදනයට ලක් වෙනවා. අපි ඒක නවත්තන්න එහෙන් ඉදිකිරීමක් කරලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට ඒකේ බලපෑම මේ අම්මට්ටමකට මේ පැත්තටත් එනවා. ඊට අමතරව අපිට අර ඈතින් පේන තත්ත්වය තමයි මෙතන මේ පහළ දිගටම අපි ඉන්න තැන ඉඳන් කිලෝමීටර් 11ක් පමණ තියෙනවා මෙම ජලාශය මුහුදට යාවෙන්න. ඒ කිලෝමීටර් 11 තුරාවටම අපිට දකින්න හම්බෙන්නේ මෙන්න මේ කියන ඊටම කනගාටුදායක විදියට හානි කර වෙච්ච යුරු ප්‍රදේශ තමයි. මේක තමයි දැදුරුවේට අද වෙනකොට අත් වෙලා තියෙන පාරිසරික හානිය. මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් අපි කතා කරොත් ඉඩම් අහිමිවීම සහ ඉඩම් අහිමිවීම වෙනුවෙන් අපිට දරන්න වෙන වියදම. මේක අපේ පුංචි ශ්‍රී ලංකාවට දරා ගන්න බෑ. අපි හොඳම දේ තමයි මේ පරිසරය ආරක්ෂා කරගෙන මින් ඉදිරියට මේ කටයුතු අවම කරන්න ඕනි. මම මේ කටයුතු කියලා අදහස් කරේ අපි කවුරුත් දන්නවා මීට අවුරුදු 10කට පමණ කලින් 2006 වසරේටත් පෙර සිට දැදුරුවේ ජලාශයේ සියලුම ස්ථානවල අනවසර වැලි කැණීම් විශාල වශයෙන් සිදු වුණා. දැන් ඒවා අපිට තියෙන සුප්‍රීම කෝට් නඩු තීන්දුවත් සමග යම් පාලන මට්ටමකට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා. නමුත් තාමත් මේ කටයුතු සිදු වෙනවා. අපි මේ සියල්ල අවම කරගත්තොත් අපිට මේ දැදුරුවේ තවදුරටත් රැක ගන්න පුළුවන්.
දැදුරුවේ වැලි සම්බන්ධව ඇති වෙන මේ මීට අවුරුදු ගණනාවකට පෙර ඇති වෙච්ච සිදුවීම් අනුව අපි ඒ ගැන යම් කටයුතු කළා. ඒ කටයුතු කිරීමේදී විවිධ බාධක ඇති වුණා. අපි ඒකට යෝජනා කළා රටේ වැලි අවශ්‍යතාවය සම්පූර්ණ කිරීමට දරුවෝ ගියත් දැදුරුවෙන් ගත හැකි ප්‍රමාණය පමණක් සහ ස්ථාන තෝරාගෙන ඉවුරු වලට සහ ඔයට බාධාවක් නොවන ලෙස එහි පැවැත්මට බාධාවක් නොවන ලෙස වැඩ කිරීම තමයි අපේ ඉල්ලීම. ඒකෙන්දි පාරිභෝගිකයා හැටියට මේ සුළු ව්‍යාපාරිකයා හැටියටත් බාධාවක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. නමුත් රජයේ තිබුණ ප්‍රතිපත්තිය අනුව වැලි පර්මිට් එක දුන්නාම ඒක සීමාවක් නැහැ. එකවර දුන්නා වැලි ප්‍රමාණයක්, තව වරක් මීටර ගාණක් දුන්නා ඔය. නමුත් ඒ ගැන වග කියන්න පිළිසක් නැහැ. වැලි වඩදා ගන්න අය කියනවා ව්‍යාපාර මට්ටමට අපි අරන් දෙන්නේ මෙච්චරයි අනිත් ඒවා අපි දන්නේ නැහැ රෑදින්න ඕරෙන්. ඒ ගන්න කිසිම කෙනෙක් තමන්ට දෙන සීමාව සම්බන්ධව ආරක්ෂාවට වගකීමක් නැහැ. රජය නිකන් ඒකට උදාහරලා. එතකොට සිද්ධ වුණේ මොකද? මේක අයාලේ ගියා. අපි යෝජනා කළා ඊට පස්සේ මේක රජයෙන් කරන්න. ඔයට බාධාවක් නොවන තැන් වල ගන්න පුළුවන් තැන් වලින් අරගෙන ඒවා බෙදා හරින්න පුළුවන් ප්‍රමාණයකට දෙන්න. හැබැයි ප්‍රධාන කාරණය ඔය අවශ්‍යතාවයට වැලි ඕනේ. ඒකට බාධාවක් නොවිය යුතුයි. දෙනකොට මේක දෙන්න ඕන වගකීමක් ඇතුව. මූලික දේ තමයි වගකීමකින් තොරව බලපත්‍රය දුන්නා. බලපත්‍රය බලන්න කෙනෙක් නැහැ. කන්ට්‍රෝල් සම්පත්තියෙන් බලය දෙනවා. ඒගොල්ලෝ ඔෆිස් එකේ බලය විතරයි ඒගොල්ලන්ට තියෙන්නේ. ඇවිල්ලා හේතුලේ බලන්න කාලය මදි. එතකොට අරගොල්ලන්ට නියම කරෙත් නැහැ. සිකුරු සේවයක් දාගන්න, මුර සේවයක් දාගන්න. ඕගොල්ලන්ගේ මංගඩ මෙච්චරයි. ඒක වගකීම ඕගොල්ලෝ දරන්න. එහෙම වගකීමක් නැතුව කෙලින්ම මුදා හරියන අයාලේ යන්න. ඉතින් අයාලේ ගියා. ඒකේ උරු කැඩුනා. වතුර තියන්න ඕන තැන් වල වතුර නැහැ දැන් කලිවල ගත්තා. එතකොට ඔය තියෙන සංරක්ෂණ ස්වභාවයට බරපතල හානිම නැහැ හැටියට තමයි මේ ක්‍රියාව රජය කළේ. ඒකෙන් තමයි මහජනතාව අතර අර විදිහේ වැරදි මාර්ග වලට ගිහිලා වගකීමෙන් තොරව රටට වග කියන්න කෙනෙක් නැහැ මේ තදුරුවේ ගැන. ඒ තත්ත්වය ඇතුළේ එමය. ඒ නිසා අපි මේ යෝජනාවලදී කිව්වා වමනා ප්‍රමාණය ප්‍රදේශයේ ගත හැකි ප්‍රමාණයක් තියෙනවා. ඒ ගත හැකි ප්‍රමාණය ක්‍රමානුකූලව බෙදන්න. ඒකත් බැරි නම් මේ ඔය වැලි වලට ඇවිල්ලා බෙදා හරීම රජයෙන් කරන්න.
මේ දැදුරුවය විශාල පරිසර පද්ධතියකට හිමිකම් කියන ඔය. මේකෙදි විශාල සේවයක් සිද්ධ වෙනවා මේ ගොවියන්ට නැත්නම් ඒ පරිසර පද්ධතිය තුළ ජීවත් වෙන පිරිසට. මේ දැදුරේ 1992 ඉඳලා වැලි ගණ්ඩ ගත්තට පස්සේ අද වෙනකොට දැදුරේ පතුල ගිහිලා තියෙන අඩි 20ක් විතර යටට. ඒ හේතුව නිසා අපිට මේ උස්සාන වාරි මාර්ග ක්‍රමයට යටතේ වතුර ගැනීම ගොඩාක් දුරට අපහසු වෙලා තියෙනවා. මොකද පොම්පාගාර 11ක් අපේ දදුරේට ගලවගෙන ගියා මේ කාලය තුල. ඊට අමතරව මේකේ තුණු ලිම්වල වතුර අපි ඉස්සර ලිඳක් කප්පුවම මේකේ නොකොඩා වතුර ගහන්න පුළුවන්කම තුන මෙවුව ලින්වල ජල උල්පත් සිඳී ගියා. ඒ වගේම අවට හැතම ගානක විතර බීමට පවා ජලය හොයා ගැනීමට බැරි තත්ත්වයක් උදා වුණේ මේ දදුරේ ජඹුරු වීමත් එක්කලා ඒ තිබුණු උල්පත් සියල්ලම මේ දදුරේට ගලා බහින්න පටන් ගත්තා. ඒ වගේමයි මේකේ තිබිච්ච කුඹුක්ගස් වටිනා දව සියල්ල දදුරේට ගහගෙන ගියා. ඒ වගේම තමයි මෙහි තිබිච්ච වැලිය දෙම හින්දා මෙහි තිබිච්ච පාලම් බෝකු සියල්ල විනාශයටපත් වෙලා ගියා. ගමක් හැටියට ගම විනාශ වුණා. ඔයක් හැටියට දදුරේ විනාශ වුණා. සාර්ථක කෘෂිකර්මික පද්ධතියක් විනාශ වුණා. ඒක නිසා මම ඇත්තටම මේ වැලිය දිල්ල සම්බන්ධව රජයේ කරුණු කියලා අපි 2006 ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨ අධිකරණයේ නඩුවක් ගෙනාවා. 2006 226 නඩුව. ඒකෙදි දැනට දදුරුවේ වැලි ඇදීම සම්පූර්ණයෙන් තහනම් කරලා තියෙනවා. නමුත් මේ වෙනකොටත් මේ දදුරේ වැලි ඇදීම ජාවාරමක් හැටියට සිද්ධ වෙනවා. මේකෙදි විවිධ පාර්ශ්ව විවිධ ආයතනවලට ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨ අධිකරණය නියෝග කරලා තිබුණා මේ දදුරේ පරිසර පද්ධතිය යථා තත්ත්වයටපත් කරන්න. ඒ එක ආයතනයක්වත් අද වෙනකොට ඒ ක්‍රියාදාමයට නංවල නැහැ. අපි ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා මේ වගකීම්තුන්ගෙන් බලධාරීන්ගෙන් අතිගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා ඇතුළු සියලු දෙනාගෙන් මේ වටිනා පරිසර පද්ධතිය ආරක්ෂා කරගන්න කියලා අපි මේ ගම්මුන් හැටියට රටවැසියන් හැටියට මේ රටට ආදරය කරන පුද්ගලයන් හැටියට මේ පරිසරයට ආදරය කරන පුද්ගලයන් හැටියට අපි ඉතාමත්ම ඕනෑකමින් අපි මේ සියලු මේ බලධාරීන්ගෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා මේක ආරක්ෂා කරලා දෙන හැටියට මේ ගොවි ජනතාව ඒ වගේම අනාගත පරපුර වෙනුවෙන්
මම බිංගිරියේ මොකලන් ඇවේ මේ පදිංචි දේශීය වෛද්‍යවරියක් ඒ වගේම මම ගොවි සංවිධානයේ සභාපති අපි අවුරුදු ගානක් අපේ ශ්‍රී ලංකා ජලනි සංසිද්ධියේ අතුකරලා මහත්මියත් එක්ක අපි මේ පරිසරය ගැන ගොඩක් දුරට සුරකිමින් වැඩ කටයුතු කරගෙන යනවා. අපිට කියන්න කනගාටුයි ඇත්තටම අපේ මේ පරිසරය විනාශ වෙන්නේ වැලි ජාවාරම් කරගෙන යනවා. ඒ වගේම අපේ මේ ඔයවල් ඔක්කොම ජඹුර වෙනවා එකෙන් අපේ ජලය හිග වෙනවා. මිනිස්සුන්ට වතුර නැහැ. මේ ඉඩ කඩන් වලට වතුර නැති යනවා. මොකද ජලය පාත් වෙනවනේ. වතුර මේ ගලාන යනේව සේරම පාත් වෙනවා. වතුර පාත් වුනහම උඩ මට්ටමේ වතුර නැහැ. ඒ වගේම තමයි මේ කොළමුණු ඔයත් අපි පංගුවක් තැන් සුර කිව්වා. අනිත් තැන් අපිට බේර ගන්න බැරුව ගියා. ඒවා කාදෙනේ මේ පස සෝදගෙන යන කාදෙනේට ලක් වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේ අපි කියන්නේ වැලි ගන්න එපා කියන්නේ මේ වැලි ගන්න මේවා ජඹුර වෙනවා. මේ ඔයවල් කාදෙන වෙනවා ඔය ජඹුර වෙනවා. එතකොට මේ වතුර පහත් වෙනවා. පහත් වෙනකොට මේ අපේ තියෙන පොළොවේ මට්ටමින් උඩ අපිට ජලය නැතු යනවා. ජලයක් හිකතාවයක් තියෙනවා. මේ ඔක්කොම ගහගෙන යනවනේ ඊට පස්සේ අපේ මහ පොළොවේ වතුර හැදෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක නිසා කියන්නේ ඒ වගේම අපිට ජලය අවශ්‍යයි මිනිසුන්ට හැම සත්තුන්ටම ජලය අවශ්‍යයිනේ. ඒක නිසා තමයි කියන්නේ මේක ක්‍රමක්‍රමයෙන් වැඩි වෙනවා. ඒ වැඩි වෙන එක පාලනය කරලා දෙන්න.
This was a very interesting video to show what all the people around the river are experiencing. And I think that river sand mining now is in our minds and will never, and we now all realize the challenges we have to restore rivers and to stop this illicit river sand mining. So thank you again for your field trip video. It was really, really nice. So our last case study is on the water security in the tea estates. The moderator for this case study is Tom Davis. He's the first Secretary Development Cooperation at the Australian High Commission in Colombo. And Dr. Tom Davis is an experienced development practitioner and analyst who joined the then Australian AID in 2012 before moving to the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in 2013. Dr. Davis is director of Australia's Development Cooperation Bank to Sri Lanka. And before taking up his posting with the Australian High Commission in Colombo in 2018, Tom was acting director of DFAT's South Asia branch From 2012 to 2014, he was acting director in the Office of Development Effectiveness. Dr. Davis was a lecturer and a senior researcher from 2005 to 2011 in the School of Social and Political Science, University of Melbourne. Tom, please introduce your case study team, and the floor is now yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariet. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely fine.
Excellent. Thank you for that introduction, and also thank you to SEI for sponsoring this very worthy event. I only caught the last elements of the previous case study, but it was fascinating. Just a reminder also that we're taping the sessions. So the next case study is on Sri Lankan schools as catalysts, water security in Sri Lankan tea estates. This is quite an interesting follow-on, I think, from the case study you've just had. The previous case study has looked at change occurring through court action and improved governance. And I think what we'll be looking at here is the way in which change can occur generationally and through a broad understanding of education, and also how peer networks work amongst different generations. To present the main case study is Kusum Atukorala. Kusum, who I think many of you who are online already know, has a BA in English from the University of Kelaniya, and also a Master of Science from Imperial College, University of London. She received the International Water Association's International Women in Water Award and the Zonta Women of Achievement for the Environment in Sri Lanka. Kusum's work shows a deep interest in cross-disciplinary studies and also linking the academic to the practical, which I think is really important in the area that we're looking at here today. Her work has covered water resources management and advocacy, focusing primarily on ground level issues in Sri Lanka, catchment conservation and ecosystem awareness for communities, and also this work on schools in the tea estates of Sri Lanka. So Kusum will talk for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have the first discussant, which is Veena Kanduri, who I'll introduce when it's her time, and then a response from a young leader in this sector, Oshadi Ranasinghe, and then we'll go into Q&A, which Anya Grobicki will moderate. And my understanding is the Q&A will apply to both of the case studies that we've been looking at today. So without further ado, Kusum, I'll hand it over to you, and you have 20 minutes to show us everything that we need to know about schools in the tea estates and how they'll be catalysts for change. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Apparently, I can show you everything except my face because I've suddenly gone blank. And it's Halloween, so think of me as a kind of a ghostly presence. Something has gone wrong with my computer, and I have no access, being locked down, to technical assistance. So thank you very much, the organizers of this activity, especially SCI, for supporting us in this important, really important program, which is thinking of the challenges. We have been talking about women and water since the Dublin Rio. And how long have we gone on now? I don't know, maybe it's about almost 25 years, but we seem to be in the same place in certain ways. But sometimes there are these tiny little incremental achievements which gives us hope to go on again. And my incremental achievement, which I'm going to talk about, is very much related to what Dipak was telling about the toad science. If Dipak is talking about the toad science, I am talking about the worm's eye view, grassroots achievements from the worm's eye view. Yeah, and if we can start sharing the screen, Susie, if you can put in the slides, please. All of you know about Sri Lankan tea. Ceylon tea has been famous for a long time. And we all see these beautiful pictures of green, lush green valleys with the tea bushes and happy women who are plucking tea and smiling for the camera. I'm talking about another side of this same catchment, this same communities. And I'm trying to highlight the importance of this community, not only for the tea estates themselves, but for the entire country. The tea estates, can we go to the next, please? Yeah, if you look at the map here, that little triangular bit of land is the Central Highlands, and most of the tea estates are there. And many of you know about Sri Lanka, and you also know that we have a lot of downstream developments, which is part of the hydraulic civilization of Sri Lanka. The hydraulic civilization of Sri Lanka could only function because the Sri Lankan kings, in their wisdom, maintained this Central Highlands as a water tower. It was the forbidden area. It was called Tahanchikale. It means the forbidden forest. Why was it forbidden? Because that is the water tower, that is where the springs are. And if you start eroding, cutting down trees, changing the nature of that forest, we stand to lose everything which is downstream, which is our rivers, our irrigation systems, and our drinking water. Historically, the tea estate communities are the descendants of indentured laborers brought from South India to work in the tea estates. And historically, these are marginalized communities which have lower than national development indices. You name it, it is much lower there. Whether it is literacy, whether it is maternal mortality, whether it is infant mortality, the tea landscape had lower indices. They had poor infrastructure and housing. Very often people live in these little things called line rooms. Most of this is still colonial. And it's a very cramped housing, sometimes with 3 generations living within this one cramped house. Water security problems are there. And along with the coastal belt, this area has the highest open air defecation in Sri Lanka. The importance of the sensitive catchments of the Central Highlands is because, apart from the national water security that I mentioned, the tea estate, which is still very critical for our foreign income earning, agriculture, and in the last 10 years, we have quite a burgeoning tourist industry. Some of the most expensive hotels are there, which would draw in high-end tourists such as Paul McCartney coming to tea trails. Apart from that, we also have to remember that the Central Highlands and its critical water towers is not only for Sri Lanka. We have UNESCO heritage sites there. Therefore, it is something for not for the country, but also for the world. And it is also very high in under-researched medicinal herbs. We still, especially when we are having a pandemic, it would be very nice to see if any of these traditional herbs, which is still used in our medicine, can be of any use. Next, please. So the tea estates have been declining in importance because other areas such as the garment factories, the Middle East incomes has taken over. So to a certain extent, they are about, I think, the 3rd or 4th in line now. And increasingly, with the loss of these incomes, the tea estate labor has gone out mainly to the urban non-informal sector looking for jobs. Many women have migrated to the Middle East or other countries. The labor is usually tied to the estate because if you are a laborer, you are entitled to the estate. So often one member of the family will continue to work on the estate just to maintain that house. But the tea estate communities live sandwiched between 2 or 3 groups. But the forest is owned by the Department of Forest, and the Department of Wildlife, the land in which they live in and the very house they live in is owned by the management of the estate. Water and sanitation issues, like I said, was very, very high. And more they have been facing climate-related stresses. Next, please. What kind of climate-related issues affect the tea estate communities? Longer drought with resultant water insecurity, which leads to struggles for water even within the estate and its related ecosystems. We have witnessed when we are doing this activity, which is an ongoing activity, the schools fighting with the estate, that means the parents stealing the water from the schools. And the lack of income again has the issue of, taking the younger people away from the sector into the urban informal sector. Deforestation and the lack of lowering incomes of the management, estate management, means that replanting is not done and more ecosystems are being cut down. And this leads to wildlife-man conflicts. This year we have lost 20 mountain leopards, and one of them was the very, very rare black leopard. So the high intensity rains, which is part of climate change, is also exacerbated by poor soil management, which is also partly due to the loss of income. And now it has given us this new thing called landslides. Next, please. Every time it rains, the GSMB, the Geological Sand and the NBRO, the National Building Research Organization, gives out a red alert. And this was only within the last 10 years. And more and more of our estate laborers are having their pathetic little line rooms getting knocked down by landslides and rock falls. There are just two pictures of two major landslides. Samasarakanda in Aranayaka, which is the highest killer, and Koslanda comes almost the same. Next, please. What do women do in tea landscape? Women, as in other parts of the Sri Lankan economy, carry the large role in, I would say, an inordinate role in earning for this country. Whether it is garment factories, whether it is remittances from the Middle East or the tea industry, it's women's earnings which keep this country going. Women work from 6 o'clock in the morning and come home at 6 o'clock in the evening. The problems caused by low estate incomes and the dependence on the estate employment ensures that they are often kept in a level of poverty which is not experienced in other areas. The absent mothers going to the Middle East leads to guardian grandparents, like this little child who has to go for her first day in school with grandpa. The accessibility issues, because the tea estates are in very remote areas and the roads are pretty bad. The acute poverty that the children face and the limited resource base for schools. Children walk 5 kilometers to school. They take their shoes off because they can't afford another pair for that year. And that low literacy of the women is again an issue because they can't help their children with their schooling. Next, please. Next, please. Some slight changes are happening because the line rooms you see at the bottom at the right side are now being replaced by individual houses that you see on your left side. And this is going to change the social framework of the estates. But how will it affect community unity? And will it give the people with their individual houses and their ownership a greater sense of stewardship of the water resources of their area? Next, please. Yeah. Some of the activities that we have been carrying out for the last 5 years in the estate sector raises more questions than answers. The intra-system water conflicts that we see all the time. Can we help this by building an awareness of the ecosystem services of the entire ecosystem and not just this one estate? Can we give awareness of stewardship? Like Paridhi said, how do you have an awareness of stewardship when you never ever go beyond your estate? Can we do activities which build confidence, leading to behavioral change? Can we talk about an appreciation of WASH, water supply, sanitation, and human rights, water sanitation and hygiene as a basic human right? And can we bring up a group of community leaders and game changer schools to lead the way? Next, please. There are some supportive issues that we see with the government supporting the Sustainable Development Act, setting up a Sustainable Development Council. But on the other side, we also have a country which is high on the Global Climate Risk Index. We have the silo thinking of agencies and political divides, which is not easy to bridge at least in this community. We have caste and cultural issues coming within their community. And therefore, there's also, because the communities are so remote, there's very little civil society and NGOs going into advocacy and action. Next, please. But I'm talking about a strange group of people who got together, and this is the entire list is there, in working with the Department of Education, Central Province, and the Department of Health on what they call the School and Community Program. It is an advocacy partner network, and we have, it's interesting to know that we have private sector entities such as Unilever's and Hatton National Bank, as well as the government organizations, Sri Lanka Water Partnership, a civil society, and a World Bank project. These people do not work together all the time, but we get together on different activities. Next, please. So again, what do we do to make the change makers? The young children and school children who are better educated and who have, because of their changing employment, they have aspirations, which means that when they come back from their job in Colombo, they don't want to go into a place with no toilet. Can we do the promotion of water stewardship? And here it has been the mothers who had been strongly supporting, because most of our programs go through the parent-teacher associations, and most of these members are women in spite of their heavy burden. Next, please. What are the challenges? In spite of the modernization, we sometimes have vestiges of the colonial management style. We have already talked about land. We have a highly trade unionized society, and most difficult for us is there's no research done in the estate sector. Very, very limited number of programs have been done. Therefore, there's no research, and there's a very poor understanding of the issues. So the worm has a hard time, Dipak, in understanding the issues. The limited resources for health and education means that a child who is in the tea estate school may never ever visit the Horton Plains National Park, which is almost next door. So upstream action has to meet with these downstream challenges as well. Next, please. So what did we plan to do? Because this is a community which is not having a certain levels of education, we tried to go away from the lecture mode and try and develop activities where we use music, we have faith, art, drama, faith-based groups to promote our mantra, which is awareness, advocacy, and action. For me, I always say that, you know, the software has to go before the hardware. So it is useless building toilets if you do not give a sanitation culture to the community. And more in every one of these activities, you can see that there are children doing dramas, talking about the water ATM, and children doing paintings. The women and youth have been the catalysts. Next, please. I would like to play this video, and I would like to recognize the support given by Unilever's PLC for doing for carrying out this activity. And Susie, can we have the video, please? And I think the images always speak better than my words. The music was done by a estate school teacher herself. As much as we use other, song, drama, etc., to give the message, in the end, this is what we want them to do. This school, Agrapatana Tamil Mahavidyalaya, has mapped the water sources of the area, and it is put up on the board or for them to see and work in their environmental programs. Environmental programs should not be from a book. It has to be from our living, the environment, the ecosystems. And again, we think that, you know, the changing the mindset of children is what is going to eventually change the mindset of the community. Next, please. In order to do that, we also have to develop location-specific advocacy tools. This one is as you can see the little graphics, it's about water quality in the estate sector. And this was developed with the mothers. We gave them a draft and the mothers commented on how, you know, how our draft was, you know, totally wrong. So we changed it. And we are thankful to the Sri Lanka Water Partnership for having helped us develop this. And next, please. Ours is a, like I said, a worms level initiative, trying to change the poorest of the poor, the most marginalized in our communities, to expect to understand their own ecosystems, but also to improve their livelihoods and come up to a level that they did, that their grandmothers never had. So grandmother on the left side and granddaughter on the right side has to go up this very steep path in order to combat climate change and reach their higher levels of livelihood as we aspire for all of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Kusum. So look, we'll turn now to our first discussant, which is Dr. Veena Kanduri. Veena is Executive Secretary and Country Coordinator of the India Water Partnership and has got more than 30 years experience in the areas of water, livelihood and food security, women and development, microfinance, rural and urban sanitation, water and natural resource management, climate change, forestry and the environment. You must be tired, Veena, that's a lot. And look, I won't go through all of the things that you have done, but just note that you've been the Regional Council member of the Global Water Partnership for South Asia, and you've sat on a variety of committees, including Advisory Committee Council for Aquatech, Central Advisory Board of Water, the Indian Water Resources Society, amongst many others. Veena has a PhD in environmental biology and is very well set to act as discussant on this particular case study. So over to you, Veena.
Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction, and also thanks to organizers, first of all, for organizing this very wonderful webinar on women, water and climate change. And I'm really thankful to Kusum. We are working with the South Asia region from past almost 15 years, and Kusum is really a grassroots practitioner, and from practice to policy, she advocates. So first of all, thank you, Kusum, for this wonderful case study of Gyawali River. I think it reminded me of my earlier career days when I was involved with the school kids and women in the remote hilly terrain after my PhD for conceptualizing the watershed program. So thank you, Kusum, for capturing the landscape of Sri Lankan tea state and for providing a very, very insightful introduction of the tea states. I feel the case study highlighted the central highland tea states, which produce a very high quality tea, as Kusum have already highlighted, and which is also a treasure of ecosystems, and which is the water tower, which she has already highlighted. But if you see, the irony is the tea grower laborers has very low development indices and social indicators, such as health, sanitation, housing, education, incomes, and employment opportunities, and which has been significantly lower in the plantation sector than other sectors. And it is not different in India and other parts of the world also, where the tea states are dealing with this kind of low development indicators. So why tea state workers have been deprived of even basic amenities? As Kusum have already highlighted, the reasons are, if you see that tea states are still using historic tea state-centric perspective. And labor is totally dependent on the state housing, which is very, very limited ownership. And they are having very low limited ownership of land, which leads to poor sense of stewardship. And that's why Kusum have very rightly pointed out that stewardship without ownership is the critical problem. So not only Sri Lanka, but if we see the tea states in India, the problems of the Northeast, Assam, Darjeeling, Siliguri, they are also facing the similar scenarios. And we all are aware that tea cannot be grown without water. And that's why responsible water management is equally essential to sustainable tea production. As Kusum have highlighted, that tea states are facing enormous challenges from climate change. And if we see that temperature rises, decline in annual rainfall, drought-like conditions, strong winds, even a new phenomena like hailstorms, landslides have been very, very detrimental to the production of high-quality tea. So, the importance of sensitive catchments of the Central Highlands for natural water security cannot be denied, as she has rightly pointed out. But if you see the upstream communities also polluting local rivers through mismanaged waste, and sometimes open defecation is very badly impacting the downstream catchment of rivers, and that's why thereby creating water security issues for the whole catchment community. In the inaugural session, the minister have highlighted that 90% of Sri Lankan population has access to water. But if we see that only 43% of those in the East State sectors have such access. And the other problems I want to highlight that the climate change is giving reduction in the sunshine hours, relative humidity, infestations of different types of insects, pests and diseases. They are not only impacting the tea quality, but the overall health of East State workers all across the globe. So, keeping in view all these constraints, I think it is really very, very important for program planners to think about how future directions can help the tea state workers, and mainly women and female-headed households and other vulnerable communities, to take sustainable management of the resources. If we see that tea state women has severe time constraint due to tea plucking and managing domestic workload, and the hardship is more for the female-headed household because they have to take all the burden on themselves. Then overcrowded and unhygienic living conditions in the residential colonies makes tea state population very, very helpless to various diseases. No maternity benefit schemes for the tea garden workers, and even during pregnancy and postnatal, women continue to engage in the hard works. If you see across the globe, even in the East State sector, adolescent girls drop out of a school altogether because of the poor quality of life. So I think the Kusum highlighted the case study of tea state is very, very pertinent, because in this, the program designed for Tea State by involving women and youth clearly provides a very, very thoughtful insight to mobilize communities for first the catchment conservation by building awareness of one's own ecosystem, and which is very, very important. If we see that these initiatives, which she has shown through the video and through the case study, clearly have linkage to across all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals targets, which relate to social and economic development, and dependency upon sustainable and reliable water supply in adequate quantity and quality. And I must say that in the morning session, Dipak also highlighted about the engagement at the local level, which Paridhi also highlighted. And I think what Kusum have done is the real, involvement of inclusive governance and the practice by connecting with the local environment at the village level, and thereby empowering the communities and the youths. So I appreciate Kusum and all stakeholders who are in fact mobilizing communities and mainly schools. It is not very easy, but the approach used by the program taps into the state community culture to find the ways for sustainable behavioral change is the key of this whole program. I think what Kusum have taken the approach by connecting with the culture of the local communities, by engaging the youth through the folk, song, dance, and skit. I think that is a direct connect with the community. And for that, you don't need any policy perspective. You are directly communicating with the community in their own local language and local message. I think that is very, very important. And uniqueness of this program is also very, very supportive of consortium partners such as NetWwater, YWCA, Sri Lanka Water Partnership, and most important is the private-public partnership to start supporting the provincial education and health authorities for responsible behavioral change and responsible water stewardship. As Paridhi have pointed out that how Sri Lanka Water Partnership is working with the grassroots level communities and the school children for providing the appropriate messages. I think that is the crux of the local stewardship. And for that, we don't need any ownership, but the ownership is of their own environment, of their own surroundings. I think that is very, very important. The case of Sri Lanka school communities reminds me of my own experience of rejuvenating river and tributaries efforts in the Hindon and Ganga basin by involving youth and women. And what Kusum have highlighted, the approach to directly connect with the youths, because they are the people who are going to change, who are going to take the plunge of the whole problems, and they are the people who are taking the right directions and lead as a catalyst. So having worked with the youth, I realized that if you equip a community with the right information and encourage them in the right direction, they usually feel compelled to improve their situation. And this has been rightly pointed and indicated by Kusum in the last slide. We talk about the curriculum-based information. We are talking so many things in the books, but how we can teach our own kids about the surrounding ecosystems? Can they define their own ecosystem? Can they recognize what kind of groundwater is available in their village, in their surroundings, whether the water is polluted? Can they do these small exercise? I think that is a very, very important message for taking the stewardship and leadership for the water sector.
Veena,
Veena, you have
yeah.
to make final comments.
I'm just fine. I'm just giving the final comment. And the water stewardship project equipped the tea estate community with the knowledge to deal with them problem better by engaging school youths and local tea estate women. Similar efforts are going in different parts of the country. But my question to Kusum is that how we can ensure to take up policy and programs that enable women participation to overcome the traditional barriers and acquire them new skills to become better managers to support better livelihood options in the tea estate. And as profit margins are falling to cut labor costs, tea companies are exploring greater use of machines to harvest and spray nutrients. In such scenarios, how tea estate workers can be ensured of traditional livelihoods. So with this, I thank organizers for giving me this opportunity and these questions to Kusum. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Veena, for those insights. Look, we are running a little bit behind time, so we'll move straight ahead into the response from the young water professional, who in this case is Oshadi Ranasinghe. Oshadi is a NetWwater volunteer, and she works in areas of environmental management and conservation, as well as biomass energy, forestry and sustainable practices. She has a Bachelor of Science with first-class honours in environmental conservation and management from the University of Kelaniya in Sri Lanka, and a postgrad diploma in environmental management from the University of Moderator in Sri Lanka. So I'll hand over to you, Oshadi, to make your reflections on the talk.
Thank you, Tom, for the wonderful introduction. And I would like to thank to the previous speakers for their great insights and perspectives. Today, I'm here to present my perspective on future directions for young water professionals in catchment conservation. Can we have the first slide, please? Yeah, next slide. As you all aware, tea estates are vibrant, astounding, dazzling landscape which provides you the best picture postcard scenery ever. But we must not forget that once these areas were covered with lush green forests, high in biodiversity, and producing a large extent of carbon stocks helping our existence. Sri Lanka, along with the Western Ghats, is one of the biodiversity hotspots in the world. Even though it has lost its closed canopy forest cover from about 84% in 1881 to about 24% in 1992 due to conversion of forest to other land use. As you can see in these two graphs, this really measures with the population growth, which puts a huge pressure on land availability. And as Kusum explained, tea estates are mostly located in the central highlands of Sri Lanka, which is itself an UNESCO World Heritage Site. Therefore, protecting the catchments and saving the forest in this site is not only for Sri Lanka itself, but for the whole world. Next slide, please. Yeah. As the world moved towards the post-Kyoto climate regime, the whole world is also moving rapidly towards the Sustainable Development Goals in 2030. To achieve this, private sector has their own policies and procedures as part of corporate social responsibility. In addition to that, being one of the largest tea exporter, multinational companies like Unilever has their own agendas such as Unilever's Sustainable Living Plan. Its goals is to accomplish a sustainable business which attracts buyers and consumers from all around the world. In fact, plantation companies can achieve this through community investment, screening, and stakeholder advocacy, which will direct them to achieve the balance between three elements of sustainability: environment, economy, and social. Next slide, please. From my experiences in tea estate sector as a representative of multinational company and later in my career as a RA training auditor, the issues mentioned in this slide are mostly encountered as non-conformities in achieving sustainability standards like Rainforest Alliance, Ethical Tea Partnership, and Forest Stewardship Certificate in tea estate sector. In our joint audits with India, we got to know that the same issues are replicated in anywhere in the world. I would say, although large investments are made to obtain the sustainable certification or trying to achieve Green Frog seal of compliance, propelling them to the prestigious RA certification, most of the plantation companies are failing in obtaining certification, mainly because they do not pay sufficient attention to the most pivotal point, involving community stakeholders as partners of the sustainability process by developing awareness and developing advocacy tools. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah. I believe these are the key future areas of interest for young water professionals that they should work on. Obviously, they can do their role in strengthening public-private community partnership. And also, they can develop a scientific approach to identify possible pollution sources with the support of the community, especially the school children, to initiate community and school level actions to prevent, reduce, and control pollution. Most of the non-conformities which I have shown you previously can be controlled through community awareness and attitudinal changes, and young water professionals can definitely work on that. Obviously, young water professionals are always futuristic and innovative, so they can utilize their knowledge and capacity to help the catchment community to ensure water security. Furthermore, they can have a role to play in promoting the importance of pesticide-free, sustainable agriculture. Finally, through all these actions, young water professionals can engage in developing a scalable model to the tea landscape of Central Highlands, which can be applied in other tea growing countries as well. Can we move to the final slide, please? Yeah. These future actions will positively impact on following sustainable development goals. When the catchments are conserved, life on land will be protected. As a result, SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, which could be achieved to ensure water security. And also, SDG targets of no poverty, gender equality, and reduce inequalities can be reached through strengthening partnerships and collaborations with different stakeholders to empower the estate community. When companies invest the living conditions and total well-being, particularly in women and children in tea estates, it will lead to a more sustainable tea business all around the world, and responsible consumption and production could be achieved. Altogether, these actions will positively impact on SDG 13 climate action. In addition to that, we can expect that SDG goals other than mentioned here, for an instance, decent work and economic growth can be achieved through empowering the sustainable community engaged in ecotourism and related operations. Most importantly, any program that we do needs to be gender cognizant, addressing the issues of inequality and exclusion that women, especially community women, suffer from. Obviously, COVID has only increased the problem. There is a saying in Sri Lanka that you cannot clap with one hand. Similarly, we cannot expect to fulfill our SDG goals if we do not fully involve half the population, the women. For that, there are certain prerequisites needed to identify, highlight, and carry out the activities which will bring women to a level playing field. Obviously, we need women as full and equal partners if we hope to fulfill these actions, which will make the impossible dream, the SDGs, a reality by the year 2030. And that's the end of my presentation. And thank you.
Thank you, Ashadi. Look, thanks to both of our discussants and responders, and also to Kusum for presenting the case study. I'll now hand you over to Dr. Anya Grobicki, who is Deputy Director of External Affairs at the Green Climate Fund, recently completed a PhD in biochemical engineering at Imperial College of London, and has previously been headed up the Global Water Partnership as the Executive Secretary. So Anya will moderate the Q&A, and the Q&A will cover both of the case studies that you've been looking at across this session. Now, originally we had 20 minutes set for that. I'm going to throw to you, Mariet. Do you want to shorten the time for that, given that we are over time a little, or maybe just make it 10 to 15 minutes?
I think Anya is going to announce that we will be a little bit late, so we'll add some time to the whole webinar. So I think, Anya, the floor is yours, and we're sorry that we're a little bit late.
Wonderful. Okay. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for this really amazing set of presentations. I'm really very honored to be here and to take part in this program. There are a multitude of questions actually coming up. I'm seeing both from the current session as well as from the previous session. So, you know, let's just dive straight into the questions. There has been a question about bees, which links to the whole issue of biodiversity and the role of biodiversity in the ecosystems. So the question relates to the habitat for the bees. And I think we're all aware of the dramatic collapse of insect populations around the world. This is also linked to the use of pesticides, which was raised earlier on. So the question is to see, we'd like to see a higher emphasis on natural pollinator conservation, which has a direct impact on ground cover maintenance and regrowth naturally in all catchment areas, micro and macro. And this is to preserve the bees. But this clearly has a strong link to catchment conservation activities, which you've been talking about. So Kusum, would you like to respond to this question, please?
I think that the tea estates are adjacent to one of the most sensitive areas, our wildlife reserves, and the such as Horton Plains. And little by little, when there is a lack of incomes, people encroach into the forest area. It's not easy, but it has been happening. And they also try to take little pieces of land, along a river and start vegetable cultivation, which is of course heavy in pesticides. And with the vegetable cultivation, they are less tolerant of animals encroaching. So most of the 20 leopards who died, for instance, is because they were setting snares. The other one is that, talking about bees, and perhaps the gentleman or person who's mentioned that can also give us a solution. Lots of the women who are tea estate pluckers have been attacked by not bees, but wasps, I believe. And every now and then we have this issue of, people being taken to hospital with following wasp attacks. So I think it is this clash of the two systems which is giving us a lot of the problems. But if we do not have a policy which controls the erosion of the ecosystems, the deforestation, the logging which happens, it is difficult to work on it. So we are still stuck in this colonial mindset and colonial structures and colonial policies. We have not yet been able to evolve this into a stakeholder platform of all the people involved in these areas. And that, I think, is what is most important.
So we have a number of questions now. There's a question about the position of government policy with regard to water management on the tea estates. So I'd like to throw that open to all the panelists, but starting again with Kusum. How do you see that the government policy can affect what is happening on the tea estates?
Well, the government policy has been positively impacting because the level of education and health structures available is far beyond what was there maybe 20 years ago. So it is a very positive impact that we see there. But there is also the loss of livelihoods, and how and balancing the two, stopping people migrating. You cannot stop them, but then giving them some kind of an income sources closer to their homes is also I think an issue. The problem that I see is that we have not had a discourse related to the question that you're asking, because that discourse calls for a multi-stakeholder platform.
May I add, Anya?
Come in, Veena. Yes.
Yeah, actually what Kusum have told is correctly, because when we are linking the water policy with the tea state, if I'm talking about the India, and in India the water is a state subject, and in the tea state not only the water is connected with the forest also. So the policy of the forest and land is also impacting. So for that purpose, for exclusivity of the tea state policy and tea state growers, I think a multi-stakeholder partnership has to be set up, and the government has to be sensitized, because it's not only the water, not only the forest, not only the land, it's a coherent policy which has to be taken into account. And so far in India, there is no such policy. Someone is talking about the labor reforms. People are talking about the land reclamation projects and the role of communities. But in total, if we have to take the tea state, and that's why I asked this question, that how we from this platform can take up this issue. And from India, I think that's not taken up. So we need a coherent policy by taking the multi-stakeholder, because in this private sector participation has to be ensured also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veena. Does anybody else want to come in? If not,
yes, can I add one point here? In tea states, actually in Sri Lanka, there is an issue like this. Sri Lanka, the tea states are owned by private sector most of the time, and it is their territory. So for monitoring some activities like soil conservation, which is very much necessary in catchment management, is restricted to a little, to a certain extent, due to this limitation. I mean, there is no access for the government. At present legislations, there is no provision for the regulators to go inside the tea states and impose the conditions. So the government is thinking about the changing of that policy now.
Thank you very much for that clarification. That's very good to know. If we could now maybe go back to the earlier session on the river sand mining. We have a number of questions on that as well. And I'd like to start with two somewhat related questions. We have one questioner who's saying, are there alternative methods of collecting river sand or alternative sources of river sand that don't cause so much damage to the river catchments? There's a related question from another questioner saying, how could we actually start a discussion with the building industry to change the use of materials so to avoid the use of river sand altogether? So who would like to tackle these two related questions, please?
Yeah, can I add here as well? Because the alternatives for river sand mining, the discussion started with the, as I mentioned in my introduction as well, with the construction development industry during last 2 years. And we had a lot of workshops and consultative seminars with the alternative to river sand, that is mainly the manufactured sand that is technically feasible and environmentally also for the time being it is feasible. So the construction industry is now moving towards the manufacturing using of manufacturing sand. But the thing is, the mindset of those people who are engaged in construction industry has to be, I mean, changed, because they more or less prefer to use river sand because most of their technical specifications, especially in the government sector, the technical specifications are based on the river sand, not the manufactured sand. So there are a lot of things that we have to consider in this scenario. The lot of things are to be changed in documentation, in policies and legislations. That is one option, the manufactured sand. There are many other options that we have considered in Sri Lanka, and it's also in UNEP report also they have highlighted what are the other options for the instead of using the river sand.
So I'd like to add to what Badra has just said. The construction industry is quite a conservative industry, but you do see a lot of change happening at the global scale. Many parts of the industry are now moving or exploring the use of renewable resources rather than non-renewable resources like sand and gravel. So you find that some at the company levels, you find companies trying to build timber skyscrapers. So these are called ply scrapers rather than skyscrapers. And you find lots of interesting buildings coming up in the Netherlands, in Canada, in Australia, many different places. So we really need to explore the use of renewable materials. Timber is one option, sustainably sourced, responsibly sourced timber is one option. There are other options like straw bale construction. Straw bale is a co-product. It's something that is currently burned in many parts of the world, but it offers tremendous insulation value. It can be used successfully to build. There's rammed earth construction. So there are really many different options that we can explore. What really we have to drive home is that the sand in rivers has an ecosystem role to play, and it's best left there. There are other building materials that can be employed. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you so much. Now, following on from what you just said, there's a questioner who is suggesting, would it be valuable to link the environmental destruction caused by river sand mining to the disaster risk reduction movement? And so if one then brings that disaster risk reduction community on board, that could provide stronger voices against the illegal sand mining.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. So if you look at concrete, for example, and if concrete were a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. So concrete is really, because cement is responsible for 8% of global carbon emissions. It's a huge, huge consumer of natural resources. The building industry is the world's biggest consumer of natural resources. So especially after disasters, we kind of tend to need more material, more experts. So it's very important to explore alternative materials, renewable materials. It's important to recycle the sand that has already been extracted and is present in infrastructure. Across the world, there was a World Economic Forum report in 2016 that said, across the world, less than a third of construction and demolition waste is recovered and reused. So what's happening right now is that we are extracting from precious ecosystems, we're building, and then at the end of the life, we're throwing it away in the landfill. That has to stop.
Thank you so much for your response. Yeah, I'd also like to add that the role of green concrete, I believe, has a big role to play. There's just so many innovations happening at the moment in terms of material science. And we really also need to look to innovation, because the use of sand for construction is such an enormous social problem that I think in the long run, we have to bring in alternative materials. I've got a message now from Mariet that unfortunately we have to wrap up. So I'd like to just thank all the participants, panelists, and presenters so much. This has been a wonderful women-centered session, and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you so much to everybody. And thank you to our audience as well for being with us. And with that, I'd like to give you all a big round of applause.
Thank you very much, Anya, and thank you for joining us at the last minute. And I know we were running late, so we had to pressurize you a little bit, and I'm really sorry about that. All the questions that have been in the chat box and in the Q&A, we will send them to the different groups, and they will answer you. So don't worry that the answers will be forgotten. And apart from thanking everyone, I think I would like to give the floor to Saradha. Saradha is is part of the organization team and a Soroptimist, and is representing Soroptimist International of Southwest Pacific and Asia. And please, Saradha, could you wrap up and close this wonderful session?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marie, for that nice introduction. And really, I must join you, Anya, in congratulating all the wonderful speakers and panelists for an outstanding presentation today. I'm sure you'll all agree with me that we've had a really stimulating lineup of experts in the water sector who have inspired us and challenged us to confront the many issues facing water security in this region. The problems of river sand mining cannot be understated even more. It has caused so much structural damage to riverbanks, bridges, and vast communities living along the riverbanks. And it's not unique to Sri Lanka, but can also be found in several other countries in Southeast Asia and South Asia. I think this was so clearly exemplified by Dileepa's video and slides, which showed such dramatic destruction of the river banks of the Didaru Oya, which is really, it's such a crying shame that we've allowed such a thing to happen. But sadly, as long as there's a demand for sand, illegal sand mining, whether from rivers or the sea, will go on despite many countries having in place laws and regulations to mining and exporting sand. The lure of money and profit is too great to resist. So clearly, we need to find some urgent solutions. And I've heard some excellent solutions as well, from Kiran suggesting alternative building materials, and Anya suggesting that we should have green concrete, brilliant. We have to go there, but we have to balance cost, availability, and knowledge about how to use these different structures. So that's for young people like Paridhi and Oshadi to explore and tell us how to do that. And talking about tea plantations, Kusum has highlighted such a vast and ever-present problem in the tea estates of Sri Lanka, but they also occur in India and Malaysia, where we have many tea plantations too, and they pose a real threat to water security. Even more exciting was our keynote speaker, Dr. Dipak Gyawali, who gave us such a thought-provoking discourse earlier. And he spoke to us about how climate change problem is created by this energy sector, but the impact is felt in society through the water sector. And clearly water, which is life, it touches everything. We need to respect and take care of our rivers. Climate change has a direct impact on water security, which in turn affects food security. The need for water has never been more clearly and acutely felt now because everybody has to wash their hands because of the COVID pandemic. How do you wash your hands if you don't have clean water? Where do you wash your hands? Do you wipe them on the leaves of the tea estates? You know, I mean, it's just, nobody's even looking at these problems and they're just saying we have to wash your hands. And the poorest communities, as you've all rightfully pointed out, including women, children, indigenous tribes, differently abled people, minorities, are once again the most badly affected. So before we end today's session, once again, I'd like to thank our wonderful speakers, expert discussants, and other panelists for your thought-provoking presentations and for highlighting the issues that pose a threat to water security. I would also like to thank the audience for your active participation and your questions and comments. Your insight and suggestions will prove very helpful to us as we confront the challenges and find solutions to the way forward. This episode, The Way Forward, will be further explored in tomorrow's conference, so please don't forget to tune in once again to part 2 of the conference, which will start at 2 p.m. Sri Lanka time tomorrow. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to thank the Stockholm Environment Institute for their invaluable support in sponsoring this event. I would also like to thank all our other sponsors for their support and contribution. And then maybe some of us can become the toads and provide a toad's eye view. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presence and have a wonderful evening, afternoon, or morning, as the case may be.